I've decided today just to go through Robert J. Lifton's 8 criteria for thought reform. This can be applied to any number of different cults, different beliefs, and assess how dangerous, how manipulating, how truly cultish they really are. The first one is basically control of information, communication within the environment and with individuals, resulting in a significant degree of isolation from society at large. This control of what the individual sees and perceives can take place in many different ways. It can be something as simple as simply suggesting that only people of this belief, this particular belief you're told to believe in, is the one way. Some of the cults out there use certain terms to describe people outside of the group. Abusers, haters, subversives, demonic possessed, or whatever, to try and suggest that people outside the group are somehow inferior, or should be hated, or should be defended against, because they are not in the one true way, or they're dominated by dark forces. It varies with every cult. There are slight differences, slight variations. Some may try and claim that there are demonic forces at work, other people simply that if you don't have the right ideas, you cannot be trusted, or the external world is not enlightened enough to be there for you or work for you, or it will damage your own spiritual progression. With this kind of idea going on, they can prevent you from developing fully into who you are, or being who you are around other people. Instead, you're always at a distance because you're part of this special group. Whether you call yourself the chosen people or enlightened or whatever, you're restricting your reality, your environment, your existence as a human being, allowing yourself to become simply controlled. The second criteria for mind reform is a form of mystical manipulation which is present in pretty much every cult to some degree. You try and manipulate experiences that appear to be spontaneous, but in fact are planned, orchestrated by the group or its leaders in order to demonstrate divine authority or spiritual advancement or some special gift or talent that will then allow the leader to reinterpret events, scripture, and the experiences as he or she wishes. Through this process, you can be made to believe certain synchronicities are part of a greater plan. Oh, this happened to you in your past because you weren't on the right track. This happened to you now because you are on the right track. And through the correct interpretation, a very subjective interpretation, they can make you believe almost anything of any kind. Whether we talk about certain groups saying if you believe in this, then you will go to heaven. And if you believe in that, oh, you will go to hell. But of course, through this we can prove it, because hasn't your life been better since you joined us? Haven't you been happy? And through the blind obedience and brainwashing, you believe and you're happy. Through the interpretation, the support, the love bombing within your group, they make you believe the things around you are part of a greater truth, the big picture, the mystical truth, the spiritual truth. But it's about control. A very common characteristic is a demand for purity, where the world is viewed as good, bad, black, white, pure and impure. And the members are constantly forced, told it's the important thing to do, it's the vital thing to do, to conform to the ideology of the group, to strive for perfection, for enlightenment, for progression, to become a perfect vessel, or who you truly are in the eyes of the group or the cult. In this, they demand certain levels of, well, control. They promote the idea of you should feel guilt for this or guilt for that, shame. And they use other techniques to do this, including forcing away friends and family. People who might save you from a cult system, they force those away, because that is something which could break the control. If you had good friends around you and you're talking about some bizarre religious control system, people would realise and I'd try and talk to you and say, well, can't you see? Can't you see? And you might even break away from the cult, but the cult or the religion or the organisation knows this. The techniques in place are there to ensure people sever those ties, like saying something as simple as spiritual family. Oh, those are your family, but they don't understand you because you've found the truth. They're still deluded. And if you can't bring them over to us, to the truth, to the actual genuine spiritual truth, then you should sever all ties. You've got a spiritual family now. Your brothers and sisters of the church, of the temple, of the group. Our guru is like father or mother. That kind of mentality, it ensures that you become more and more embedded in the cult, seeing them as your family and casting away all these supposedly impure elements, like people who might help you. The idea of confession, the idea of sin for any reason. You had a negative thought, you've talked to the wrong people, you've got the wrong ideas, you need to confess. If you don't confess, you can't move on, you can't progress. The idea of confession is a good way of getting information on people. And if you should choose to leave the group, what should happen? Oh, that information can be used against you, of course. How best to centralise a cult than to have as much information on them as possible, as much control. You had a negative thought, you were feeling depressed earlier today. Well, you need to confess that. Not because it's a crime, of course, but it's made to feel like a crime. You've had doubts. You've had this. You've been told things by people you shouldn't be talking to. Sin, sin, sin. The attitudes and ideas of people. And they're told it's false. Not reason, not inquiring into different elements. Not simply an agent of doubt which you can use to try and think about the world around you and what you really want to do, but break you down. When you take away the idea of doubt and these attributes and attitudes you hold dear, or perhaps you just simply happen to have, you break those down. It's taken away your ability to escape from the organisation. And this information is of course going to be exploited by the leaders, by the inner group, who realise if you should try and leave, they know a lot about you. Too much, which they can use to control your actions, whether to silence you and prevent you from destroying the cult or damaging its reputation, or they can destroy your reputation per se and make you suffer, either drawing you back into the cult or making you so unreputable as to be irrelevant in terms of actually criticising the cult organisation. They can say you're subversive, they can say you're infected or possessed by certain elements, beliefs, ideas. They can use that to their advantage. That's why confessions are so common in many of the cults and religions around the world. The idea of sacred science. Yeah, our science works. We can prove our ideas. through this and that. You get people trying to use certain, well, numerological systems to prove that they are a highly spiritual being or a guru. They use mathematical equations to try and say that they have cracked the code of the pyramid, or discovered the true meaning of the Mayan calendar, or they have gone through the scriptures of the Bible or the Quran and discovered the greater truth, or something to that effect. But it can just as easily be something like miracle water, or some special technique, something they pass off as being the truth, the proof for the truth, their scientific truth. The group's doctrine or ideology is considered to be the ultimate truth in such a system, beyond all questioning or dispute. The truth is not found outside the group, so anyone you talk to on the outside who tries to say you're wrong, well, they don't know the truth. They're deluded, they're confused, they're perhaps even overshadowed by something negative. And in that, you cannot be wrong. Your cult can never be wrong because it is the truth. The leader, as the spokesman for God or for all humanity, is likewise above criticism, above any form of questioning. To question the cult leader in many cults and beliefs and organisations brings about a negative effect, because, well, surely you're not seeing it right. Who have you been talking to? Once again, this leads into confessions. The idea that you're questioning the cult, or you're questioning the leader, you're going to find that they say, well, you've got negativity, or you're being overshadowed by a reptilian, or something equally as moronic, trying to tell you that you're going against the science of this cult because you believe the false science. Whether they call it demonic, negative, unenlightened, or whatever, the beliefs outside, you've been affected by them. And through this they can continue their control. All of these elements link in, all of these criteria link in to isolating, subjecting the individual. Loading the language. Many groups out there have all these words and phrases which are interpreted according to the ideas of the cult. Certain concepts and ideas which they use to manipulate individuals, making them believe certain things are true or not true, simply based upon the idea that a certain word, a certain level of jargon, consists of truths. Things like true thought, being self-honest, and a list of other terms which are usually individual to each cult. They have these terms to basically terminate thought. These thought-terminating terms are used to make people believe the term over the fact. So you don't need to think, you just need to say, I'm being self-honest, I'm being enlightened, I'm being spiritually aware. Such terms like this can be used to basically allow people to suppress their thoughts in favour of the jargon. You talk to someone outside the group and you're saying, well, you're not being very enlightened about it. You're not being very wise. And they can keep on using these terms because it's their blocks. It's like mental blocks inside the mind. That's what the loading of the language actually does. Creates blocks inside the mind to actually prevent you from questioning the belief. You're so busy thinking self-honesty, purity, awareness, being processed or whatever, that you're not really thinking in the everyday world. You're thinking from behind, well, brick walls of thought, containing your mind and your free ability to express ideas. Why is a person expressing ideas against my cult? You might think it must be because they're subversive, because they're demonic, because they're affected by reptilian mind control, or something equally as paranoid and fearful. It's the perfect control, all of these elements linking in, caging the human mind, preventing you from seeing reality, creating all these mental blocks, to stop you from thinking like a truly free human being. The idea of the doctoring over the person. The members' personal experiences are subordinated to the sacred science, and any contrary experiences must be denied or reinterpreted to fit the ideology of the group. It's not about the personal spirituality or search for truth. It's not about seeking reality. It's about being forced to conform. To bow your personal ideas and understanding your own reason, rationality, to the cause, to the idea, very often to the leader. Because you're just a serf. You're just controlled. If you're finding this, and many of the other characteristics, you know you're in a dangerous cult. The idea of being repressed by a belief, your own experiences which contradict, they must be denied. Stamp out doubt. Stamp out doubt. Oh, reinterpret that. Oh, that wasn't a negative experience, that was a lesson. God didn't do that to you, the devil did it. Oh, well, that was a test. And so on and so forth. It's all twisted to support the ideological constraint, to ensure your blind obedience. The final part is where we dispense with the value of existence, the value of the individual. The group has the prerogative to decide who has the right to exist and who does not. This is usually not literal, but means that those in the outside world are not saved, not blessed, not enlightened. They're unconscious, unenlightened, bestial characters, sinners and haters and abusers. They must be converted to the group's ideology, and if not, then they are damned, or they'll simply not exist, they'll simply fade away or burn in hell or whatever. If they do not join the group, or are critical of the group, then they must be rejected by the members. If you ask questions instead of simply nodding your head like a fool and accepting, if you ask simple, common sense, rational questions which you would expect to have answered in any other situation, you must be rejected. Thus the outside world loses all credibility. They're just haters and abusers, they're subversives and so on and so forth. They're just simply outsiders. In conjunction, should any member leave the group, he or she must also be rejected, because you have broken your covenant. You have broken your allegiances, your loyalty and your honour. You have broken away from the true path, the spiritual path of righteousness and truth. As a result, you must too be rejected. You must be separated, taken away, broken away from the rest. So remember the 8 criteria and apply it to the cults and organisations you see here on YouTube or you see in your everyday life. Environment control, mystical manipulation, demand for purity, cultic confession, sacred science, loading the language, doctoring over the person, dispensing of existence. And you will find these very simple 8 criteria can be applied and used to dissect many of the cults you see around you.
Every move that you make is recorded in the air. How about